All right, welcome back. Welcome back. We are in Jeremiah. We're going to have a wonderful time in Jeremiah. Today I'm super excited. There's so much information. You can probably see my eyes like dancing in my head. I'm like, what direction do we go? We're handling Jeremiah all the way through. That is the goal. That is the intent. We are taking our time. I don't have an intended timeline for when we were finished. I know there's some things that'll kind of pick up in speed as we cover some topics, but we are in Jeremiah. Last week we did the introduction. This is like introduction chapter 1, part 2. And we're going to cover Jeremiah, learning more about who he is. A lot of this process, and I want you guys to really frame your brains like around this. We are going to learn Jeremiah as a prophet. And in learning Jeremiah as a prophet, we're also going to understand Yah's heart for his people. So you might be like, why did we spend so much of a character study on Jeremiah? Well, similar to 1st and 2nd Samuel, where we did this before. If you're not familiar with those series, they are on YouTube. We got into the character development, why Yah spent so much time explaining to us who a person was, what they were doing, their life choices, how they dealt with them. And with all of that, toward the expected end of us also realizing our function, our purpose, and how Yah is drawing us. One of the really important things I believe in this time, in this age, is understanding Yah, understanding how he has spoken, understanding how he is speaking still, and some of the patterns in his interaction with his people and his nation. Super, super, super important. And the book of Jeremiah leaves nothing to the desire because it lays it all out there. So this week, just to give you kind of an overview, we're going to cover Jeremiah's name very briefly. We didn't get into Jeremiah's name, what his name means, because it has a lot to do with Yah's heart and Yah's intention for calling him for the people and what Yah was going to do. We're going to get into a bit of just a little bit ahead of time of Jeremiah's psyche, because we've all heard of Jeremiah being called the weeping prophet, right? So in understanding his name and understanding his internal struggle, understanding what he went through, you'll kind of understand why you're going to see this, because his call is very clear. We're going to look at Jeremiah's call. We're going to look at kind of review a little bit of the information we covered. We're going to look at what Yah is asking of Jeremiah. And then we're going to look at the call of a prophet, but also the understanding of the general call of the nation. And those are very important because they're different. They're different toward the same end, but they're different. And then we're going to look at the 2 examples of Jeremiah's call. And then we'll kind of wrap it up around there. And that should get us to chapter 2. So that is our intention for today. How we'll do it is the same format. I will give you guys like the lesson format. We're going to cover some more of that, a little bit more of that timeline that we covered last week. And then we are going to get into some new information. All right, let's start with Jeremiah's name. Jeremiah's name in Hebrew is Yirmiyahu. And I'm going to pull up my Bible screen that we were looking at last week. I'm using the Logos Bible program. And those of you who are in Royal Roots Academy, you guys have access to this this tool, so you probably all know how to use it. And there are free versions of it for anybody else who doesn't and would like to kind of see what it is like. So that is what you normally see up on my screen, where you see things kind of split between the King James Version English and then the Hebrew below. And so when we left off last week, we left off past this, but I want to go back because I was like, hey, we didn't talk about what Jeremiah's name means. So Jeremiah's name is a compound word, what we would kind of call a compound word in English. And most of the time it's like, oh, it's just Jeremiah. And if you look through these words, that's what you're going to get. But Jeremiah's name actually is made up of 2 words. It's the Hebrew word for Yah, or Yahu, which is the name of the creator. And then the word Rom, Resh or Rum, Resh Vav Mim. The first part of his name is, and I'll give you just a little bit of grammar for the Hebrew students. The first part of his name is conjugated. And it means that he will rise, or he will lift up, or he will uplift. So it means that Yah, is being the he, will uplift. So that is what Jeremiah's name means. I personally did not know it or understand it like that until I really looked at it. I was like, oh, Jeremiah. Last part of his name is Yah. That was like that part, and maybe like Yah's going to take care of him. But the idea of uplift is so important, because when prophets were called to prophesy, they had pretty much one or two things. They would be called to bring judgment among the people when they were going wrong, or to uplift them as they were trying to come out of doing wrong. And Jeremiah, because he sits in between these two kind of areas, he has to give judgment against the people. And he later is also going to have to uplift the people out of the very judgment that he had to proclaim. Jeremiah gave the judgment, the people hated Jeremiah for it. So when we read these prophets, we're like, oh my gosh, they're so amazing. How could somebody not like them? They were telling the truth. They were, look at this, look at how Yah was speaking to them. The very sad thing about the life of the prophet is nobody listens to them while they're prophesying. It's normally a remnant that hears the prophet, but the overwhelming majority is normally opposed to the prophet, thus showing the heart of the people being opposed to Yah. And so the opposition to Jeremiah as a prophet is double heartbreaking, because it's not only showing the condition of the people, but then the condition of the people is now reflected in their treatment of him. He's looking around. He knows his experience to be true. We're going to get into that today. But at the same time, and the people know how to hear a prophet, because it's prophesied. We're told about how to hear a prophet in Torah. But at the same time, he's being told something, and then other preachers and other prophets and other people are saying the opposite of what Jeremiah is saying. He's hearing one thing, he's confident that Yah has called him. And other people are preaching something completely different, and the people are going toward that. And he sits in the middle between Yah and the people, and his human expression of his experience. We learned last week of his youth, because he's a young man. And what he has to go through in his life is a glimpse into the heart of Yah and how Yah feels, even if it's just a mere man expressing it, how Yah feels about the waywardness of Israel. How Yah is coming, and he's saying one thing, and then other people come and tell us something else, and we heed that and we reject him. We get angry with Yah. We don't want to hear Yah. We turn our hearts away because it's not what we want to hear. And the prophet is in so many ways the man, or in some cases the woman, if it's a prophet, standing in the gap, receiving the beating that humanity wishes they could give Yah. It's a very, 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 very interesting place to be. So in stories where you have prophets, what happens is their name, especially if it's a prophet where their name and their story is told, which most of them we do get a background glimpse. As the character unfolds, we see the name closely connected to the narrative that's being told. Right? Closely connected to the narrative that's being told. And this does not work in English or in any other language. That's why it's very important that when we're looking at the scripture, we look at it in its original culture and context. The name of a prophet or the name of a person in general both mirrors and substantiates the truthfulness of biblical events and prophecies. Their names are actually markers, and they give the full picture of the prophecy. So if you guys remember Isaiah had, his wife was called a prophetess, and then she ends up having children, and her children are named specific names depending on dealing with the condition of the people. So that's just one example. And so when it comes to the two main kind of prophets I talked about earlier, there's a prophet of wrath or reproof and a prophet of consolation. And you see both of these kind of in Jeremiah. So you can see how he can be one who wars between what he's having to do, his heart for the people, and the depression it caused to be outcasted for speaking what Yah told him to speak. Jeremiah didn't ask for this. The book doesn't open up and say, I prayed to the Elohim of Israel and asked that he raise me up as a prophet to tell my brethren about this. And it's unfortunate because most of the time we hear about people and nowadays, they feel something, but they take on the call, but don't use their voice the way they should. And Jeremiah is saying, not only was this something that I didn't ask for, but Yah literally had to strike his words into my mouth and had to train me because I wasn't even trained well. We open up with Jeremiah literally being born in Anathoth. He's born in a Levitical city. His father is a priest. And for him to open up the book with what we read last week, which was, I'm a child, I'm unskilled, I'm unlearned, is a testament and a judgment of sorts against what was happening in the land of Israel. His father is a priest, but when it came to the role of a prophet, he didn't go, oh, I know your word. I know it well. I know what to do. I've seen this. I have men and women who've gone before me. I'm confident in my ability to walk in this role. He was afraid. And you'll see it later on. So I'm going to you'll see it. We'll talk about it a little bit more later on. But you see it in 2 Kings. His father, Hilkiah, is the one when Josiah begins to reform Israel, who discovers the book of the law while they were cleaning out the temple. The father of Jeremiah, who was a priest in the temple, is the one who finds the book. So Jeremiah is telling the truth. The people had not been teaching the people, the priests and the people over the word had not been teaching the people to be skilled in the word. And it wasn't something that was just outside of the temple. It was happening in the homes of the priests as well, because Yah calls a prophet from the home of the priest, who of his very own testament says, I'm unskilled. I haven't been taught. I'm 20 at this time, around 20 years old, 20 plus years old, early 20s. And I don't know. I don't even know why you're calling me in so much way. I'm not the one. I'm not the one, which should have been quite the opposite, right? Talk about a time during where there was more, even though it was corrupt, there was more training happening, because Yah sent Samuel, right, to be trained by Eli, whose family was corrupt. But when Eli gets Samuel coming to him a couple of times, he goes, oh, wait. You going back in there and you respond to Yah. You're getting called. Jeremiah's called, and Jeremiah's going, okay, I need to go talk to my dad. And he's like, this ain't for me. Like, you're calling me? I don't know. It was overwhelming. So you get to see that character of a person who literally begins to, and has to, and does grow up amongst the people, is persecuted by the people, and yet has to still serve the people, and his heart is still toward the people. It's a very, 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 very beautiful story, and Yah's choice is always right. All right, just a little bit on the timeline. So we went to the timeline up to 627, to Jeremiah's birth. And I want to just jump a little bit ahead, just a little bit, because Jeremiah is getting ready to have two, if you want to call it, Yah's going to allow him. He's not going to, it doesn't get produced out of him. We'll cover that. He's going to see two things. And so kind of jumping a little bit ahead into the timeline is going to help us better understand. So we stopped at 627 at Jeremiah's call. And that's where we are currently in Jeremiah chapter 1. When we get down to 626, we have the Scythian invaders from the north invade Assyria. They weaken Nineveh. Okay, so that's important. And then Nabopolassar drives Assyria out of Babylon. 625, these events are happening quick, right? And remember, they don't have social media, they don't have cell phones, they don't have CNN, they don't have, NATO, the G7, there's not a convention being held. Yah is bringing global news if you will, to Jeremiah that's so far in so many ways off of his spectrum. I'm sure people obviously heard about it. You're a nation, but these things are happening. And when Yah gets ready to give Jeremiah his vision for his call, he gives him two very important visions. And one of them is concerning events that are happening way outside of the central area of Israel. So what's important is that when he begins to share his call, the call should confirm what's happening, because see, this is not something everybody knows. So then when it takes place, the people go, whoa, 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 how did you know that a pot was going to pour out, and that pot was Babylon and it was coming toward us? They didn't see that on their radar, because remember, the people were prospering. The prophecies and things that happen are not happening because the people are like, oh, this is so terrible. There are times like that. Those are the prophecies of consolation. But normally when the prophecies of reproof come, the people are faring well. They're doing well. They believe in their minds that they're prospering. They believe in their minds that everything is good. And what's happening on the outside is, as they're disobeying Yah, they're not doing the commandment of Shamar, they're not guarding the Torah. At the same time, their fence and defense is crumbling. There is a relationship between the Israelite guarding the word and keeping, that's the Hebrew word, keeping Torah, and keeping their defenses. Yah holds back the enemy as they guard the Torah. The further we move away from Torah, the wall that is Yah weakens. I will then let your enemies in. When you're guarding my word, I'm guarding you and I'm brooding over you. When you don't guard my word, then I have to be just and I cannot protect you. You protect the word and you do that, I protect you. It's a shepherd and a sheep relationship. While the sheep are eating, the shepherd watches. The Torah is the food. The Torah is the pasture. The Torah is the nourishment. You're eating, I'm watching for your enemies. You stray, guess what? Now I got to go chase sheep in 15 million different directions. Not that Yah is not omnipresent. I'm giving an example. So then guess what? Then as I'm doing this, as you're straying, your enemy's coming in. As I'm trying to draw you back to me and you're running off, you're running toward literally what I saw far off, which was wolves and lions and things that are coming against you. 624, this is also during the time of Jeremiah. We talked about how it was such a sensitive time within the whole house of Israel, but also obviously in Judah, because we know that Israel, obviously they lost their minds, right? And so Yah's like, I'm trying to keep, you should not have followed your treacherous sister. Remember, the prophet later he talks about that. So then you have Judah going astray, and it's such an interesting time, specifically because Judah's the lawgiver. The scepter, the law comes from Judah. So when the foundations are destroyed, what happens to the people? They also are destroyed. So there is a ultra effort, if you want to call it that, from Yah. These prophets start coming. Zephaniah, Daniel's born. Like, all these prophets are literally like, hey, we got to keep you. Listen, this is getting ready to get real bad. This is also important because this is the lineage of the house of David that the Mashiach is supposed to come from. So the corruption of the people without a remnant is also a devastation of human and global proportions. They're looking at it as like, oh, it's just us. This is just how. No, you're set up to bring salvation to the world. The destruction of you is, you don't even understand that the whole system and balance could be thrown out. So 624, you have the prophet Zephaniah, and he gives his book. He discusses, oh, look at this, the Scythian invasions into Judah, the coming Babylon destruction. So he also has a witness with him, and the coming of the day of Yah, because all that's happening is not about us. It's for his name's sake. He said it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in Torah. So you have the Medes from the northeast defeating the Scythians, and they begin to pressure Assyria. So you can kind of see that on this map, right? And you have like all of this stuff happening, these people coming down, and everything is like converging on this area. Remember, Israel gets into disobedience, so they're not in the territory from the Nile to the Euphrates, right? They're not like ruling as big as the borders that they have been promised. So the whole world, this is like the known world, is converging on this one area, right? It's just like literally it's converging in. You guys have this, so you can go read through it. So in 623, Josiah repairs the temple. He's 26. Jeremiah is about 26. And this is the part I want to get to. The priest Hilkiah finds the book of the law, which gives obviously credence to Jeremiah saying, I'm not skilled in this. That's not what's happening, right? So you have that happening, and that's in 2nd Chronicles and 2nd Kings. And then you have another witness. You have the prophetess Huldah. She prophesies for Josiah. This is very important. The same thing that Jeremiah has prophesied. You'll see that in 2nd Chronicles and then 2nd Kings. If you look at what she says, it's directly in line with what Yah says. When Yah speaks, his prophets should be saying the same thing. He's not like whipping up different meals like we do for our children. Oh, you don't like tomatoes? Okay, I'm gonna make you a sandwich. Okay, you don't like this? I'm gonna make you nuggets. Yah's like, no, one meal for everybody. They got everything you need in it. If you don't like it, don't eat. Like, just straightforward like that. So they try to go to, people think to the prophetess Huldah because, oh, she's a woman. Maybe she'll give us a softer judgment. She came with the same thing that Yah had and with the same fire. Like, look, this is what it is. That is the prophecy. And then you have Josiah, who then at the same time is bringing reform. Why? Because Yah always has a remnant. I want you guys to keep that in your mind, keep that in your heart. For many of us, we are that remnant of all the stuff you see happening amongst all of our brethren everywhere and all of our sister. And there's a remnant who's like, okay, this is what it is. So I want you guys to just get that frame in your mind, because that's very important. So much stuff is happening. Like Babylonian captivity was huge. I think it was one of, if not up until the complete diaspora and the dispersion and the scattering of the people, it was one of the single most devastating times in Israelite history. It was terrible. Even when the people returned, they still mourned what was before. They were in the glory of who they were. And it happened, right? You saw the North go away, but they're like, hey, you know what the North be doing, what the North be doing. And then when it all converged, it happened to everybody. It was terrible. It was completely devastating. And so Yah had employed, he says it, he's like, I send my prophets day and night, and y'all just kill them. He was like, I literally was warning you, not with just one person in one area, but Yah had like multiple prophets saying the same thing, and they didn't listen to any of them. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. So when you're sitting here and you're like, I don't know what I think about Jeremiah, he's like, you don't have nobody else? And Yah's like, actually, I had a lot of somebody else's, but my people is stiff-necked and hard-hearted. So like I'm giving them, like, Yah gave to speak to his people. And we can see that on the other side of this, the best he had. When we read the Jeremiahs and we're reading it over and over and over again, like, dang, like this is deep. Like this word matches with this, and they said this, and how did they know this? And then to know that they were like young men, you're like, and they were in their 20s. Like, this is crazy. Like, Yah, you know that nobody but Yah was in this. And Yah was like, I gave you the best you had. And I gave them my word. And guess what? These prophets that we're reading about, they didn't violate Yah's word. They weren't false prophets. They were literally telling the truth, and the people rejected them. That's why when we read back in Torah, where it says God's going to send a prophet, if when he comes and you don't listen to him, it's over. It's over. There's no there. That's it. That's it. Because he understood something about the condition of the heart, and it wasn't the prophet that was the problem. It was the heart that was the problem. We'll get into that a little bit more in Jeremiah. Okay, so we left off right around Jeremiah chapter 10, where he talks about like what he's going to be doing, what Jeremiah is going to be doing. And we have to also understand this. Jeremiah, because nowadays people get called because of popularity. Oh, they were a very popular preacher, or oh, they were a very popular politician, or oh, they were very, very educated. Yah doesn't care about any of that. First of all, he's like, I use the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. So a person, Jeremiah is not just saying like, oh, I'm not like them. Like, that's part of it, but also he also understands that that's not really what Yah's concerned with, but society can make you think that's what Yah's concerned with. David is a perfect example of that. When Samuel went to go find who the next king was going to be after Saul lost his mind and didn't listen, right? He goes, and Samuel, being a prophet priest, goes in and he has his own mind. These people are not brainwashed. They're not like sitting somewhere and then like something comes over them and they don't think anymore and they don't make mistakes. That's not what's happening. When Samuel went to Yishai or Jesse's home, he goes, oh yeah, it gotta be this one. Look at him, he big, like he handsome. Look, that's the, y'all was like, man looks on the outside, but I'm looking at the heart. And you got this man who's, everybody knows I love Samuel. You have this guy, Samuel, right? Who like, you should think he should be like on it. Like, I already know what y'all want. It's going to be, no. Even Yah's prophets in the present moment of doing the will of Yah have to subdue their own personal biases and preferences and incline themselves toward Yah. So in that scenario, right, he goes, he looks at everybody, and Samuel's like, look, you got some more kids, because I ain't getting the word from y'all and your kids, and I didn't see them. It was like, well, we did one, but he a little rough around the edges. He a little, go get David. And y'all was like, that's the one. And I'm sure Samuel was like, okay. That wouldn't have been my pick, but okay, right? So in the same way, if you're a person like Jeremiah, like we all do, right? When Yah asks us to do something or gives us our orders of deployment, if you will, we begin to look around and you're like, hey, but like they had a 2-parent home. They wasn't born in sin and fornication. And look, they love the word. And y'all look at them and y'all was like, I'm looking for some ingredients. And you may see a person, but I'm looking at every single experience and everything you've been through, and I'm looking at everything you prayed. I'm looking at your personality. I'm looking at your inclinations. I'm looking at your heart. I'm looking at your mind. I'm looking at your obedience. I'm looking at all these things. And while humans may see flaws, and humans may see age, and he's like, I'm looking at all of that. And when I take all of that and you yield all of that to me, what I can do with that, they'll know I'm in it. I'm not saying I can't do it with that, but I also know that person. And so one of the verses we read last week, and it brings me into this one, I have it bookmarked. It's a Jeremiah verse. I'm sorry, a David verse. So interesting that these kind of are overlapping. But in Psalm 139, and I'm going to pull it up. In Psalm 139, David writes about Yah and how he sees man. Last week, we listened to Jeremiah tell about how Yah saw him and how Yah explained him to himself, right? Yah explained him how he saw Jeremiah to Jeremiah and what he knew. And in Psalm 139, David is not like making this up. David has experienced Yah. These Psalms, the 139 Psalms, are like the last Psalms that David wrote. Some of them are not in order, but from 139 to I think 145-ish, these are like Psalms that are written like right at the end of David's life. And it's his full understanding, if you will, of Yah and how Yah perceives man, how he perceived him and that relationship. So think about Yah telling Jeremiah, and let me read it to you. He says, the word of Yah came unto me. That's the first time Yah speaks. And he says, before I formed you, this is an interesting way to start a conversation. Before I formed you in your mother's belly, before I formed you in the belly, I knew you, Yada, intimately. I know everything about you. And before you came as forth out of the womb, that's before you were actually born and took your first breath, I sanctified you. When you were being formed in your, like, before you even formed, when you were a thought, when you're just, I was like, that's mine. And he said, before you even passed through your mother's birth canal, I had already chose you. So everything that you're looking at in your life that you think disqualifies you, or you think is not where you're not set up, before you even got to that point, I had already made my decision about you. And there's nothing that you or anybody else can do to change my mind about you, because I chose you way back here. That is so important. That part right there is like, and I'm not making that up. I'm not putting it on a slant, because I'm going to read you 139. So you know I'm not lying. David's going to say it before Jeremiah even comes on the scene. And he says, and I ordained thee a prophet to the nations. You knew, because I'm like, we all know ourselves. We know little boys. We know little Hebrew boys. And you like, so you knew me? Yes. And you, yep. And when you was just a regular kid talking crazy and like, oh yeah, she fine. Then too, he was called to be a prophet. These are normal people. Like, no, they're not like, they weren't like sitting in the room and these were like really good kids who were just like, oh my gosh, I just love y'all. Like, no, he was a little boy who grew into a man, who probably had crushes on girls and who probably didn't think the right things. And of course, because he was not fully understanding his position in the world as a priest's son, he probably did some stuff. He probably like, you know me? That's probably Jeremiah's mind, where Yah had to say, I know you. Like, how does he come saying, I know you? Because he's like, do you really know me though? Like, no. I know you. I know you. And he says, I ordained thee to the nations. All right. So let's go to Psalm 139 and listen to what David says. He says, oh Yah, you have searched me and you know me. That word Yada is that word like where it says, and Adam knew Chava, like he knew Eve. Like it's the end. I know you, like Yah tells Jeremiah, I know you inside and out, bro. Like, I know you molecularly, hairs on your head. I know your thoughts. I know where you, it's like, oh yeah, you've been watching me since I came out the womb. So you was, yep. Like, yep. My eye has been on you. So verse 2, you know my down sitting, that you know when I sit down and when I stand up. Not just like, you know, when I do something wrong and it sends off like red alert, hold descending. Like, no, you know, as simple as when I like get up from my seat to go get some water and then come sit back down. He said, you understand my thinking from afar off. You know what I'm going to think even before I think it. So me thinking I thought something that disappointed you can't be true, because you knew I was going to think it before I even thought it. Says, you compass my path and my lying down. You're with me when I'm just going to get some gas, walking. And then when I get ready to lay down and go to sleep, you're literally making sure everything is in place so I can rest safely. And you are acquainted with all, no, just my holy ways, just my sinning ways, just my goofy way. No, all of my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, oh yeah, you know it all together. He even stops. He's like, there ain't even, you know what? You know it. Like, that's how that's written. He's like, there ain't, he can even go into like what was on it. So he's like, you know, but you know it all together. You have beset me behind and before, back and front. There's nothing hidden. I can't like cross my fingers and stick it behind my back and say I'm gonna do something. You see everything about me, which is interesting because last week in Hebrew class, I was talking to Hebrew students and I said, you know, we have this video game experience, like when we're in our bodies. Unless you're in a mirror, right? The only thing you really see is your hands. You don't know what you look like. Even in a picture, they only can capture a part of you. But Yah's like, I know what you look like. Like, I know it's inconceivable at sometimes. Like, I said, you don't know what you look like. You're like, yeah, I do. Most people think they know what they look like because you see yourself in a mirror, but you don't see yourself like in a room of mirrors all the way around. You've never seen yourself outside of your body. So he's like, you know me in a way that I don't even know me. And he says, and you have put your hand upon me. Like literally, like your hand is on me. You're guiding me. He said, and he sits and he thinks about it, David does, and he goes, this kind of knowledge is too lofty. It's too, the word is peli, like palal, like it's too wonderful. I can't even like grasp that. He says, it's high and I can't even attain it. Now peep this. He's not talking about astrophysics or quantum theory. He's talking about himself. The one thing that we should all have a little bit of a grasp on. He was like, your knowledge of me is beyond me. And he goes, where can I go from your ruach? Or how can I flee from your presence? He goes, if I try to get in a rocket like Elon Musk and go up into outer space or into the atmosphere, you there. And if I try to dig a hole and go down as far as I can into the belly of the earth, into Sheol, into beneath where we are, you're there too. He's like, okay, well, if I get wings and I fly and I get real early and get out before you get there, oh, you was already there. And he's like, okay, what if I just go out, right? You know, 70% of the earth is sea. If I go out there, way out there, where I'm like a little dot in the middle of the ocean, dang, you there too. He's like, even there, your hand will lead me and your right hand will hold me. If I say, I'm gonna wait till it get real dark so nobody can see me. And nope, even that darkness is light to you when it comes to me. The darkness can't even hide me from you. He said, but when it comes to how you have your hand upon me, the night looks like daytime. And the darkness and the light are the same. Your eyes are never off me. He says, why? Because you have literally snatched my reins. Like you are literally holding on to me. And you have covered me, here goes right here, I did all that for this, in my mother's womb. And he says, and I will praise you, for I am fearfully, now everybody knows this verse, right? Fearfully and wonderfully made, colon, it's not the end. And he goes on to say, marvelous are your works. I have to, and you guys have probably heard me say, I have to begin seeing me like Yah sees me. He's like, everybody know David. This is the end of his life. We know he killed Uriah. We know the whole get down. And what Yah has spoken to him, and then Yah is also echoing to Jeremiah, and what Yah also wants us to know about each and every one of us is this is how I feel. This is not like it's not a feeling, like this is the truth. This is literally my heart and my mind toward the apple of my eye. It's true. So David, being much wiser than we are, says, you know what, I'm gonna stop arguing with me and you about how you feel about me when this is what you've told me and this is what you're gonna tell other people. He says, look, I'm just gonna praise you for it. I get it. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And he says, and marvelous are your works. And my soul knoweth right well. That part, he's like at the deepest part of each and every one of us, which is why you have not jumped ship on Yah, is because even though you've been raised to doubt who you are, you've been raised to see yourself as nothing, deep down where Yah has placed it, you know right well is true how he feels. And you almost feel a little crazy for agreeing with Yah about how he feels about you. How? But you know deep down inside, you're like, it can't be nothing but love. When you start making the math make sense, right? Make it make sense. You're like, it can't be nothing else. And he's like, deep down inside, you know it's true. And he says, my substance, he goes back to this. He's like, I know it's true. And I know nothing is hid from you. It's true. And you really know me. This is like racking his brain. He said, my substance, like even like the atoms that create electromagnetic field that makes me visible, it's not hid from you. He said, look, when I was made in secret, I mean, like when my parents laid down and made me and curiously wrought me, right, together, you saw me when a stethoscope couldn't hear my heartbeat. And when ultrasound said, ain't nothing in there. Like that's, Yah's like beyond all that. This one right here. Your eyes saw my substance. Because you don't think like David's like, everybody thinks David's like some kind of like arrogant person who thinks he's like perfect, right? So let's just see what he says. Yet being unperfect, like he knows the reality about who he is. He says, and in your book, all of who I am is written, which in continuance were fashioned when there was none of them. Like you knew every part that was going to be on me before they even came together to be a part. So he says, how precious also are your thoughts to me, oh yeah, and how great is the sum of them. Your thoughts to me, toward me, how you feel about me outweighs any way I feel about myself. And he goes, and if I should count them, there are more in number than the sand. So all the negative that we allow to play, and I just saw Teshuvia come in, and it's interesting because she's been doing this thing about self-talk, and I've seen it pop up and I haven't really like dove in, but literally one of the things that as I'm reading this, he's like, the amount of things that Yah feels about me or that Yah expresses toward me that are positive outweigh the amount of rumination and negativity that I have in my head. And for many of us who do that, it seems like it's never ending. But Yah is like, if you just shift your focus and accept me calling you, that whole thing will flip-flop and you'll see them like David did, where he got out of his own head. He'll see that the things that Yah thinks toward him are greater than the negative that he has that exists in his head from what's planted, what he's seen in the world, whatever. And he goes on to saying, when I wake, I am still with you. He's like, and guess what? This ain't just a dream. Ain't nothing I just thought up. And if I go down and go to sleep with my fathers and I wake up, you're going to still be there. It's really and truly, if you want to talk about it, we do this like, now I lay me down to sleep. Like this is the thing that every child needs to hear before they go to bed at night, before they get ready to drift off and finish off the rest of the day. Because as children get older, and you can think about this like with somebody like Jeremiah, as you get older and as you grow up, the confidence of who you are to Yah, the world chips away at it. Your own imperfections and your own sin chips away at it. And how precious is it to be reminded of Yah's love and expectation, especially when you begin to get older and begin to drift, and to know that this is how I'm supposed to be, and this is how I'm seen. Expectation breeds excellence. That's what it is. When we have people that we care about letting down, when we have people who we know expect something of us, somehow it's harder to be a particular way than if nobody cared. Nobody care anyways. That's a different mindset than if you say, nope, everybody cares, and oh, Yah cares and he sees. So if nobody else cares, like Yah, well, he's like, if I be for you, what's the world against you? I know you're probably like, Huldah, why'd you just do that? Because it all goes into Jeremiah. So let's get into here. It's a great introduction for where we're going. So Jeremiah goes, when we got to verse 10, Yah spoke to him, right? And he gave him the words. So Yah speaks to him again. So it says, moreover, so this means like another time, the word of Yah came unto me saying, and he calls him by name, Jeremiah, which means like when he calls him, and when Yah calls us, he's calling us for his name's sake, and he's calling us by his name. He's like, the one who I uplift, because I see you down. I see you don't really understand it. So he calls him by his name and he goes, what do you see? Now that's another interesting introduction. So somebody asked, like, how do you know when you hear Yah? And I'm starting to think, and when it's completely just like, why? Where did this come from? That could be a really good sign, because I'm sure we've had that where you're sitting and I'm like, what? Okay, that's not me, because my mind was so over here. I was thinking about, buying the kids Madden, and here I am like now looking at what I see out here. So in this case, he's giving you his honest report. He goes, Yah calls, and he goes, what do you see? And so what do you think Jeremiah started doing? We started looking, like, what's put before me? And it's interesting because the call of the prophet is not what the prophet wants to see. It's not the prophet going out and saying, Yah gave me a word for you. And what I see in you is, if you follow the text, when Yah is exercising his voice through the prophet, he gives the prophet what to see, what to inspect, and what to perceive first. And then the prophet then goes into dialogue with Yah before the word even makes it to a person. That's very, very important, because it's like spur of the moment prophecy. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but this spur of the moment prophecy is less common to what we see when the prophets are called, where the prophet is exercised in their gift, right? You have good prophets, bad prophets. You have false prophets, real prophets. You have Balaam, who literally was a seer, if you will, and he wasn't even like one of Yah's prophets like you would see here. He's a foreigner, and he's prophesying because he had somehow got in tune with the true and living Elohim. So we have to see these different components working. So he goes on and he says, what do you see? And so guess what he had to do? The word for see is ra'ah. It means like, what do you see? Like, what are you seeing? So Yah literally places, if you will, the vision before Jeremiah. Jeremiah doesn't go and hotbox and come up with the vision. He doesn't have this like experience that now gives him a vision. Yah, in his full consciousness, puts the vision, and he's testing the prophet to see if he sees what he needs him to be seeing. He's not making it up for himself. He's not like looking around and saying, I'm looking for the word. No. In this case, Yah put something in front of him. Don't believe me? Let's keep reading. He says, I see The Hebrew word here is ro'eh. It means, it's in the, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of grammar. It's in the cow participle, which means that I am seeing, not I'm imagining. It literally means like, it's like if water is running, that means that the water is on. Not I know where water is, or I've seen water before. It literally means that this is literally playing out before him. So he asks him what he sees, like with your eyes, not like in some kind of ethereal space. What am I causing you to see? And he goes, I am seeing. He's reporting it as if he's looking right at it happening. I see a rod of an almond tree. This is interesting because how the word is set up in Hebrew. This rod of an almond tree is the word shaked. It's shaked, right? And he goes, I see the rod of an almond tree. And he says, and Yah says back to me, it's full dialogue, right? Thou hast well seen. That was well seen. So that's verse 12. He says, yep, he says, lir ot, right? Lir ot ki shaked ani. So he's telling him like, you saw good. He says, that's right. That's, you saw what you saw. And that's what I put there. Because if he would have said, I saw a fish flopping, like, bro, like you're not here with me. He's like, you saw well. And he tells him, now he tells him what he saw. He doesn't leave the interpretation up to the prophet. The prophet receives the interpretation. So he says, you've seen well. And the word here for, he says, lirot ki shekod, the word he uses the same exact word, shoked, I'm sorry, the same exact word for almond tree. Yah says, now I'm going to give you the interpretation. What you saw is an almond tree, correct. Now let me tell you what that almond tree means. He says, I will hasten to perform my word. The idea for hasten is the almond tree. The same word for almond tree is the word for hasten. So just as sure as you see this almond tree, this idea, and I wrote down a note, the word for shoked means like to watch. Like, so I will literally, you'll watch my word be performed. He caused him to see something, it manifests, and as sure as you see this almond tree, and this almond tree is important in the Hebrew culture. Remember that the almond rod, remember the rod that budded, that Aaron had, that was in the ark? It's this idea of like fruitfulness, but it's also watchfulness, and it's also a sign that Yah is with something. He's like, just as sure as this almond tree, or this almond rod, really, this rod of almond tree is budded, like Aaron's rod budded, proving who he was and what he was supposed to do, that he was chosen. In the same way, my word will be hastened to be performed, and it will prove not only that you are my prophet, but that I'm telling you what I'm really telling you. And the word of Yah, so now Yah came and told him, you know, you're mine, called you from the womb. He's come again, and this time he's like, I'm showing you some things. And then he comes again, now a second time, with a word, not with just a declaration that is literally for everybody. That's how he feels about all of his children. Now he comes again and he goes, what do you see? So Jeremiah's getting kind of good at this, right? He goes, what do you see? And so guess what? Yah's going to put something in front of them. He goes, I see, that's a word, ro'eh, like I am seeing a boiling pot, and the face of it is toward the north. And Yah says, okay, out of the north, an evil is going to break forth upon the inhabitants of the land. So just as sure as I said I was going to perform my word, like you saw this almond tree, what I'm saying about this is true too. Once again, come back into the Jeremiah that's like the 20-something-year-old, right? All right, I get it. You called me. I get it. You know me. And I'm okay with seeing the almond rod and knowing that your word will be performed. These are all things. Now you telling me that I'm gonna have to tell people that we get ready to get this. So I got to go talk to people about this. It's okay when I'm experiencing it. Now you're telling me that you were serious about that part where you were like, go talk to people. And you're now telling me that that there is a boiling pot being boiled over. Okay. Like, so Yah goes on, he goes, for lo, I am going to call the families of the kingdom of the north, Assyria, Babylon. They're all warring up here, the cousins, right? They're all fighting. I'm going to call the families of the kingdom of the north, saith Yah. He's like, I didn't come up with this. And they're coming. And they will set everyone his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem. They're coming for this place. And they're not just coming at the gates, they're coming at the walls, and they're going to encompass it all around. They are fighting to see who gets to tear this up, who gets to rule this place. And specifically, so he's like, okay, and against the cities of Judah. He's like, that's my house. That's here. That's coming here. Like, if right now somebody said, yeah, so China and Russia, like they come into America. All right, straight. Maybe America. Oh, but actually they come into to your city. Wait, at the gates? Yeah, and they're gonna be on your street. You're like, oh no. Like this is, he's like, literally. And he says, now I'm gonna utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness. He's like, wait, you told me to put your words in my mouth. You're talking to me, which means that I'm gonna have to say what you're saying to me right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell them, you're going to explain this, not just a judgment, but now you're going to say what they're doing wrong. At the end of that Jeremiah, of that Psalm, it literally, after all that David said about how Yah felt about him, at the end of the Psalm, he says, he goes into like this weird space and he goes, and I hate all the things that you hate. And he's like, and your enemies. And you're like, what did just happen? Like he went from like, yeah, so wonderful. He sees me like this. And I hate everything that you hate. What he's saying is, if you see me like this, and if this is how you feel about me, and I know that I'm nothing. I'm like, but dust. David even sees like, I'm like a dead dog. Like, who am I? Who is man? He's like, if you see me like this, then my loyalty to you, because he's a warrior, right? He's like, I ride for you. Like, that's like his mindset, right? And so the same thing here, where you have Jeremiah not only being called, not only being told about who he is, but now he's being called into allegiance. And now that I've called you, and now that I feel this way about you, you gonna ride with me? I got something I need you to do. Like, it's like, because Jeremiah, and I'm not even adding conjecture, because later on, we'll get to this. Jeremiah's like, you seduced me. You didn't pull me into this, and you got me, people hate me. He literally was like, this is like gang, like it's me and you. Like, Jeremiah, you my guy, and you have to go out here and do this, but Yah's gonna literally, like, he's gonna offer him, and this, because my hood life is coming out. He's gonna offer him protection, right? So he goes, I'll utter judgments against them, you're going to tell them, I'm going to, not you. We know you probably don't really want to do this. My words are in your mouth now. You're my vessel. So he says, and I will utter my judgments against them. So Jeremiah is establishing, I'm not saying this about y'all. Like, you already know how I grew up. I grew up like y'all. How do I have a right to say about y'all what the very things that my daddy and everybody else is doing? It's not like that. This is Yah telling me, sorry. So he says, who has forsaken me and have burned incense. He's like, not just that y'all sinned. It's going to get deep, because I should know this. I'm just Jeremiah. And you've been burning incense to other gods and worshiping the works of their own hands. The people have been doing like the other nations, making their gods of their own hands. So now, for those of you, I know most of us have, you get Jeremiah 10, you're like, oh, Yah was already setting him up. Like, all of this is what Yah told him to say. Yah had a lot to say, by the way. Jeremiah's a long book. So then Yah tells Jeremiah, he says, all right, so gird up your loins and get up and speak to them what I've commanded you. He's like, wait, I thought I had time. Like, you gave me some visions. You told me nice things about me. He's like, all right, go. And it's not even like we hear it, because Jeremiah's writing it, right? And so when you're reading writing, there's also this thing of like, the writer is really like, well, painting a picture. So God tells him all this, and he's like, now get ready, bro. Get up, arise, cum, and speak unto them all that I command you. And he said, and because remember, we already established from Jeremiah and David, I already know what you're thinking before you're gonna think it. I know what you're gonna say before you say it. Don't worry about what their face is gonna look like either. He's like, before you even say, hey, wait. He's like, and how I'm gonna set you up is if you worry about what they are gonna think about you, and you don't say what I tell you to say, because you know this is true. We talking now. You responded. He says, if you get dismayed by their faces, I'm going to make you look dumb in front of them. You need to be sold out to me so that when you get ready to speak, you let my words come out. Don't get thrown off by them, because as much as they want to act like they don't know what my voice sounds like, and much as they want to act like they don't know what they do, and they know. And if you come halfway, you're gonna look dumb in front of them. Remember, when he starts speaking, he's going to the people. The people know. He's like, so just, you got to say it, or you will be confounded. The word here is the word hatat, and it literally means to be shattered and filled with horror. They are intimidating. You're like, I know my people. They scary. Like, if you look at them and if you focus too much on what they're going to do to you, because they'll do it. You know what happened, Isaiah. We all know the kill prophets. If you worry about them, and if you let them intimidate you, they will destroy you. 20 some years old. This is a lot. He goes, but wait, don't trip. Because I have made you this day, a defense city. You're untouchable. Don't even trip. You got to believe that, though. They can't touch you. They cannot touch you. I have made you, just as sure as you saw this almond rod, just as sure as you heard me, just as sure as you are here, just as sure as you were called to be my prophet, I have made you a defense city and an iron pillar. You are unmovable. Nobody's going to move you out of your space, even though they're going to seek to, even though they're going to talk about you, even though they're going to call you a lie, even though they're going to put you in prison, even though they are going to conspire against you, even though they're going to try to bring up your past and be like, ain't he Hilkiah's son? That was all that. Don't trip. You're an iron pillar, unmovable. And he's like, and you are brazen walls. You're like brass tried in the fire against the whole land. It can't miss you. Imagine what a brass wall looks like around a city. You can't miss it. He's like, everybody, nobody in the whole land. And he goes, and guess what? Not just against the people, but against the kings of Judah, which is like a prophetic perfect. Yah spoke that he wouldn't just be speaking to one king of Judah, but that Jeremiah would prophesy to kings of Judah. So he's like, wait, so that means I got to outlive some kings? Like, me and Josiah the same age. Like, so this is not no short-term thing. You're going to prophesy to kings of Judah and against their children and the princes thereof and the priests thereof and the people of the land. You're like, wait, so I'm not just going to talk to the people that like right here, like in my little clique. Nope. And he says this, he says, now I'm just going to, because you're mine, I'm going to get you fortified, and they're going to fight against you. They're going to wage war against you. But this part is important. They shall not prevail against thee. If you knew, like you knew that calamity would come and war would be waged against you, but the people waging war wouldn't win, it would set up a bit of confidence in you. Does not make anything less scary because you have to keep being reminded. But he says, look, they're going to fight you. They're going to hate you. You're going to talk to a lot of people. You're not going to say the things they're going to like, and they're going to come against you, but they won't prevail. And he ends what he says with this: for I am with you, saith Yah, to deliver you. It doesn't mean that the bad things won't happen. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that they're not coming against you. But I'm going to be with you, that when it happens, you may get so close to death. You may end up in prison. You may end up with people literally coming to your house, literally to kill you. And I'm literally going to deliver you from that until my word is performed and completed. As sure as you've seen that almond rod is as sure as the performance of my word, and my word I have put in you, and nothing can destroy my word. It shows the importance of, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, of guarding the word. As you're guarding the word, you're indestructible. He's like, I'm telling you, and all of us in that way, get my word in you. Get my word in you. And we're like, why? Why is this such a pressing thing? Get my word in you. I'm trying to put my word in you. Why? Because it's the presence of my word that's driving your obedience that is allowing me to deliver you. Very, 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 very important. So we see Jeremiah's confirmation. We see this intense dialogue, if you will, between Yah and Jeremiah. And we see Yah literally getting ready to not only do everything he said that he was going to have Jeremiah do, which is to uproot, to tear down, to destroy, to overthrow, but then he also gives him that second part, which is the consolation that he's going to do, which is to build and then to plant again. We're not going to see that till later, what that looks like, because he's going to literally give those exact words in this text at some point. But what we see now is the call of Jeremiah, the burden of the prophet, but more so, and we see also, not even more so, but as well as, it's not the prophets and the priests that caused the destruction. It was the individual actions of the nation, which meant that everyone is called to the obedience. And as they became disobedient, the walls fell, the adversaries are coming in. And what Yah is trying to do with Jeremiah is to use the words through Jeremiah that he's going to speak to help them restore their breaches. And so now we have to see whether they choose not to or whether they choose to. And that is literally the story of Israel over and over and over again.